The words came sharp and deliberate, cutting through the evening air like a blade through silk. "You just eat and do nothing else." Samantha's voice rang across our modest dining table, her fork suspended mid-air as she glared at me with eyes that had grown colder with each passing month. The meatloaf sat half-eaten on my plate, suddenly tasteless, while the overcooked peas seemed to stare back at me like tiny green accusations. I was 72 years old. I had raised the man sitting beside her, worked double shifts at the dry cleaner to buy his school supplies, cheered loudest at his graduation from the back row because we could only afford 2 seats. I had spent 3 years watching my husband waste away from cancer, cleaning his soiled clothes without complaint, holding his trembling hands when he could no longer grip his own spoon. And now, apparently, I was nothing more than a mouth to feed. My son Jason kept eating, his head down, his silence louder than any defense he might have offered. Across the table, my 10-year-old grandson Tommy looked confused, his young face scrunched with the particular bewilderment children feel when adults stop making sense. He understood enough to fall quiet, the way children do when the air becomes too heavy with grown-up anger. I chewed slowly, swallowed carefully, then set my fork down beside my plate with the deliberate precision of someone who had swallowed far more bitter things than insults. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with the weight of unspoken resentments and 2 years of mounting tension. "I cook when I can," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the tremor that had recently claimed my hands. "I fold laundry when my fingers allow." Samantha's laugh was sharp, mirthless. "When you can. When your fingers allow, Ruth. You're not that old. You're just comfortable." And the word hung in the air like smoke. Comfortable, as if the arthritis that made scrubbing floors an agony was comfort, as if the back pain that kept me awake most nights was luxury. I began collecting the dishes without another word, not with rage, not with tears, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting at the dinner table. Jason still didn't look up, didn't object, didn't even flinch when his wife's words landed like stones in still water. That night, lying in what they generously called the guest room, a converted storage space with a single window too high to see out of, I stared at the clicking ceiling fan and wondered when exactly I had become the problem instead of the solution. The house settled around me as I lay awake, every creak and whisper of the old wood familiar yet somehow foreign now. Through the thin walls, I could hear them talking in low voices, their words indistinct, but their tone unmistakably lighter without my presence weighing on their evening. I thought about the years when Jason was young and wild, how I worked 16-hour days to keep us afloat after his father's first heart attack. I remembered the late nights sewing buttons on his baseball uniform, the early mornings packing his lunch with whatever we had in the refrigerator. I thought about sitting in hospital waiting rooms while his father fought cancer, holding Jason's hand when he was 25 and still my little boy, telling him everything would be okay, even when I knew it wouldn't. Where had that young man gone? When had he learned to look through me as if I were furniture that had outlived its usefulness? The ceiling fan clicked with each rotation, marking time like a metronome for my restless thoughts. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, a decision crystallized in my mind with startling clarity. I wouldn't stay where I wasn't wanted. I wouldn't beg for basic human dignity in a house that had forgotten I was human. I would leave, not in anger, not with drama, but with the same quiet determination that had carried me through 45 years of marriage, 30 years of motherhood, and 2 years of increasingly uncomfortable cohabitation. Tomorrow, I would start looking for alternatives. They left on a Friday morning for what Samantha called a much-needed family weekend at her sister's lake house. I wasn't invited. Jason avoided my eyes as they loaded the car, offering only a mumbled, "See you Sunday, Mom," before climbing into the driver's seat. I watched from the kitchen window as they backed out of the driveway I had helped shovel for 23 winters, the one where I had taught Jason to ride his bike, where I had welcomed him home from his first date with scraped knees and a broken heart. The silence they left behind was different from the silence I'd grown accustomed to. This silence had space in it, room to breathe. I packed carefully, one suitcase with my essential clothes, a small bag with important documents, my late husband's rosary, and my leather-bound notebook, a gift from him on our 25th anniversary with the inscription, "For the things we never want to forget." I left the house key on the kitchen table next to a folded dish towel I had washed and dried that morning, a small gesture of completion. The bus ride across town gave me time to think. The nursing home I'd researched wasn't fancy. It was one of the most affordable I could find that still maintained clean sheets and didn't smell of despair. The woman at the front desk was kind, but professional, handing me forms to fill out without asking why I was there alone. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she had seen my story play out 100 times before. "It's just temporary," I told her with a smile that felt foreign on my face. "I just need some peace and quiet." Inside, I felt hollow, but also something else I hadn't experienced in years free. Sunset Manor wasn't the Ritz, but it had something my son's house had lacked respect for its residents. The staff called me Mrs. Patterson, asked about my preferences for meals, and treated my slow movements with patience rather than irritation. I fell into a routine quickly. I helped in the kitchen when my hands allowed, folded linens in the common room, and read letters aloud for Martha, whose vision had faded to shadows. On Thursdays, I assisted with the weekly newsletter. On Sundays, I led a small knitting group, even though my own fingers moved slower than they once had. That's how I met Helen. She was wiry and sharp-tongued, her walker decorated with pink ribbons that seemed to mock her fierce independence. But when she laughed, which was often, it was the laugh of someone who had loved deeply and lost completely. My son's wife told me I was bringing down the mood of their house. Helen confided one afternoon as we worked on matching scarves. Said I was too negative, too demanding. This from a woman who's never worked a day in her life. I nodded, recognizing the particular pain of being discarded by the people you had sacrificed everything to raise. "They made me feel like I was dying before I was dead," she continued, her needles clicking steadily. "Like I had stopped existing the moment I stopped being useful." That sentence lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. I knew that feeling intimately, the gradual erasure of self, the slow transformation from mother to burden. "We're not burdens," I said quietly, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Helen looked up from her knitting, her eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "No," she said slowly. "We're not." I had been at Sunset Manor for 6 weeks when I finally worked up the courage to call James Callahan. He had been my husband's best friend since high school, the lawyer who had helped us with our wills, and the paperwork maze that followed David's cancer diagnosis. "Ruth." His voice was warm with genuine surprise. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I said carefully. "James, I have a question about the house. The deed. David mentioned transferring it before he died, but I never saw the paperwork." There was a pause, the kind that suggested I had stumbled onto something significant. "Ruth, you should have received copies of everything." "Should." "David specifically requested that you be given all the documentation." My heart began to race. "What documentation?" "The transfer deed. He signed the house over to you completely in 1994, right after his diagnosis. Said he didn't want you to ever worry about having a roof over your head." The words hit me like cold water. What? "Ruth, that house has been in your name for nearly 30 years. David was very clear about it. He said, and I quote, 'She built this family. She should never have to ask permission to stay in her own home.'" I sat down heavily, my hand pressed to my chest where my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I didn't know. I mean, he mentioned it, but I thought I thought it was just talk. It's not talk. It's legal, notarized, and filed with the county. Would you like me to send you copies? Yes, I whispered. Yes, I would. After I hung up, I sat in the common room for a long time, watching other residents play cards and wondering how many of them had been told they were guests in houses that legally belonged to them. The documents arrived 3 days later in a thick manila envelope that felt heavier than it should have. I opened it in the privacy of my small room, spreading the papers across my narrow bed with the reverence of someone unveiling buried treasure. There it was, my name on the deed, the address of the house where I had been told I was an unwelcome guest, the date June 15th, 1994, and David's signature. Shaky but determined, witnessed and notarized, filed with the county clerk's office, updated annually by James as instructed. I owned the house, completely, legally, unambiguously. I retrieved my leather notebook and began documenting everything I could remember about the financial help I had given Jason over the years. Unlike the emotional pain of the past 2 years, the numbers were concrete, verifiable. 1999 co-signed car loan, paid first 5 months when he lost his job, $1,800, 2003. Wedding gift for a real honeymoon, $5,000, 2007 emergency room bill when Samantha's insurance lapsed, $740, 2011. Down payment for their second car, $4,000, 2015. Help with IVF treatments, $7,000, 2018. Samantha's dental surgery, $2, $100, 2020, 2021. Pandemic groceries across 8 months, $4,500. The list went on. 30 years of quiet generosity. Moments I had forgotten until being called a burden forced me to account for what I had carried. The total was staggering, over $180,000 in direct financial support, not counting the countless unpaid hours of babysitting, cleaning, and emotional labor. I had given without keeping score for 3 decades. Now, ironically, I was being forced to calculate the precise value of unconditional love. That evening, I called James again. I want to understand my options, I said. About the house. About everything. Jason came to see me on a gray Thursday afternoon in October, his shoulders hunched against the autumn wind. He looked older than his 47 years, worn down by stresses I could only guess at. This was the first time he had visited since I'd moved to Sunset Manor 3 months earlier. "Mom," he said, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair beside my bed. "This has gone on long enough. It's time to come home." I set down my knitting and looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. "Is it? Samantha feels terrible about what she said. She was just stressed. You know, work has been crazy and Tommy's been acting up at school. She didn't mean it. Didn't she?" Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, you're being dramatic. It's not like we threw you out. You left." I reached for my notebook, the one David had given me so many years ago. "Do you know what I've been doing with my time here, Jason? I don't know, making friends, playing bingo? Remembering." I opened the notebook to the pages I had filled over the past month. "Do you remember when you dropped out of college the first time you needed tuition money to re-enroll?" His face went very still. "Mom, what are you? $2,300. I took a loan against the house." I turned the page. "Do you remember your wedding? The $5,000 I gave you for your honeymoon? That was a gift. Do you remember when Tommy was born? The crib, the stroller, the bassinet. $1,200. Another page. The emergency room visit, when Samantha broke her wrist. $740 because you said her insurance wouldn't cover it." Jason was staring at me now, his face pale. "Mom, stop." "The IVF treatments, when you were trying for your second child. $7,000. The car down payment, $4,000. Samantha's dental surgery. $2,100. Stop." His voice was sharp now, angry. "What is this? What are you doing?" I closed the notebook carefully. "I'm showing you what 30 years of just eating and doing nothing looks like in dollars and cents." "Jesus, Mom, nobody asked you to keep score." "No," I said quietly. "Nobody asked me to keep score, but somebody called me a burden, and when that happens, you start adding things up." Jason stood abruptly, pacing to the small window that looked out on the parking lot. "This is insane. These are your family obligations. This is what parents do." "You're right," I said. "It is what parents do. We give without counting, without expecting thanks, without keeping receipts. But children," I looked at him steadily, "children are supposed to grow into adults who understand what they received, who honor it, who don't let their wives call their mothers parasites." "She didn't call you a parasite. She called me someone who eats and does nothing. In my book, that's close enough." Jason turned to face me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "So what do you want in apology money? What's going to fix this? I want you to leave." I said simply. He stared at me. "What?" "I want you to leave. And I want you to think about whether the woman who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who loved you unconditionally for 47 years, deserves to spend her final decades being tolerated instead of treasured." "Mom, I'm being honest. For the first time in 2 years, I'm being completely honest." I stood up, my legs steadier than I had expected. "When you're ready to have a real conversation about respect, about gratitude, about what it means to be family, you know where to find me." Jason looked like I had struck him. He opened his mouth, closed it, then headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "I never asked for any of this," he said. "No," I agreed. "You never asked. You just took." After Jason left, I sat in my room for a long time, not crying, not angry, just clear, crystal clear for the first time in years about what needed to happen next. I called James. "I want to sell the house," I said without preamble. "Ruth, are you sure this is a big decision?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I want it done quietly. No warnings, no family meetings. They'll find out when it's finished." Well, it's your legal right. The house is entirely in your name." "Then let's exercise that right." The paperwork took 6 weeks. Property inspections, market evaluations, title searches, all the bureaucratic machinery of transferring ownership from one life to another. The house was in good condition and in a desirable neighborhood. James found a buyer quickly, a young couple with twin toddlers who fell in love with the backyard where I had once taught Jason to catch fireflies. I signed the final documents on a Tuesday morning in December, my signature steadier than it had been in months. As I handed the pen back to James, I felt something shift inside my chest, not sadness, exactly, but completion. "They'll receive the notices tomorrow," James said gently. "Bank foreclosure notification, real estate transfer, 30-day eviction notice. Are you prepared for the phone calls?" "I'm prepared for anything," I said, and meant it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on Wednesday. I didn't answer. The second call came at 7:15, the third at 7:30. By noon, my phone had rung 18 times. I finally answered on the 19th call. "What the hell did you do?" Samantha's voice was shrill, cracked with disbelief and rage. "I sold my house," I said calmly. "Your house. Your house. That's our home. That's where we live. That's where Tommy goes to school." "It was my house," I corrected. "Legally, officially, for nearly 30 years, I simply decided to sell my property. You can't do this. This is crazy. You're having some kind of breakdown. Actually, I'm having some kind of breakthrough. Jason's voice came on the line. He must have grabbed the phone from his wife. Mom, we can fix this. We can work something out with the buyers. Maybe delay the sale. The sale is final. Jason, escrow closed yesterday. Silence. Then, where are we supposed to go? I imagine you'll figure it out the same way I did when I had to leave. You left voluntarily. Did I, or was I made to feel so unwelcome that leaving seemed like the only option? Another silence. Longer this time. Mom. Jason's voice was smaller now, younger. We're going to lose everything. The kids' school, Samantha's job, everything we've built, everything you built in my house, I said gently. On my foundation, with my help. Now it's time to build something that actually belongs to you. Please, he whispered. There has to be something we can do. There is, I said. You can learn from this. You can remember that the people who love you aren't furniture. You can teach Tommy to treat his elders with respect so he doesn't have to learn this lesson the hard way. I hung up before he could respond. Later that afternoon, I walked to the common room where Helen was working on her crossword puzzle. She looked up as I approached. You look different, she said. I feel different. Good, different, or bad different. I sat down beside her. Free different. Helen smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. That's the best kind. The house I found was perfect in its imperfection. A 2-story colonial on the east side of town, 4 bedrooms, wraparound porch, and a garden that had been loved into wild abundance by its previous owner. It needed work-fresh paint, updated fixtures, a new roof, but it had good bones and better possibilities. Most folks your age look for retirement communities, the realtor said tactfully. This is a lot of house for one person. I'm not planning to live here alone, I replied. I named it Haven House before I'd even signed the papers. Below the name, I had a small plaque made with a simple inscription, "No one here proves their worth to stay." The renovations took 3 months. I hired Tommy Martinez, a local handyman whose mother had spent her final years in a nursing home. When he learned what I was planning, he started working weekends for free. You're building something good here, he said one Saturday as we painted the common room a warm yellow. Feels rare these days. I converted the 4 bedrooms into comfortable living spaces, each with its own bathroom and sitting area. The main floor became communal space, a large kitchen where residents could cook if they wanted to, a library filled with donated books, and a sunroom overlooking the garden where Helen had already claimed the rocking chair by the window. Helen was my first resident, moving in before the paint was fully dry. You didn't forget me, she whispered as I showed her around her new room. How could I forget someone who helped me remember who I was over the next 2 months? We welcomed 3 more residents, Miss Beatrice, a retired schoolteacher whose daughter had moved her to 5 different facilities in 3 years, Marion, who had once owned a flower shop and now grew herbs on every available windowsill, and Roland, our first male resident, a widower whose children lived in different states and visited twice a year with forced smiles and careful schedules. Haven House wasn't a nursing home, it was a community. We shared meals when we wanted company and ate alone when we needed solitude. We helped each other with medications and doctor's appointments, but we also debated politics, shared gossip, and argued about whether green beans should be steamed or sautéed. On Thursday evenings, I read the local newspaper aloud in the common room. On Sundays, we listened to old records and danced in our socks on the hardwood floors. Every day, we reminded each other that age did not equal invisibility, that wisdom deserved respect, and that the end of one life chapter could be the beginning of another. He appeared on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, standing uncertainly at the front gate of Haven House like a lost child. I was in the garden, showing Marion how to stake her tomato plants, when I saw him through the rose bushes. He looked thin, not just physically, but somehow diminished, as if the past year had worn away layers of him I didn't even know existed. "Mom," his voice carried across the yard. I straightened slowly, my back protesting the movement. "Jason?" He looked around at the house, the garden, the small sign by the gate. This is what you did with the money. Part of it. It's beautiful." He sounded surprised, as if he hadn't expected me capable of creating something rather than just maintaining what others had built. Marion touched my arm gently. "I'll be inside if you need me," she murmured, and disappeared through the kitchen door with the particular tact of someone who had learned to read difficult family moments. Jason and I stood facing each other across 10 feet of garden path and 12 months of silence. "Samantha left," he said finally. I nodded. I had wondered if she would. "She said I should have fought harder, should have found a way to keep the house, should have, yum," he trailed off, looking at his hands. "She took Tommy." This hit harder than I expected. Her sister's in Colorado. I get him summers and holidays, but..." He shrugged helplessly. "It's not the same." "No," I agreed. "It's not. I lost my job 6 months ago, downsizing. I'm staying with my friend Mike, sleeping on his couch, working nights at a warehouse." He looked up at me. I wanted to come sooner, but I was too proud, too angry, too ashamed. He flinched. "Yeah, ashamed." I studied him, this man who had once been my baby, my little boy, my greatest hope and deepest love. Time had carved lines around his eyes, but more than that, it had carved understanding into his face. "What do you want, Jason?" "I want to say I'm sorry. I want to say I was wrong. I want to say I understand now what it feels like to lose everything, because you took the people who loved you for granted. And I want to ask if there's anything I can do to help with this place. I mean, I could do maintenance, yard work, whatever you need, but I'm not asking to move in or anything. I just want to be useful to you for once instead of the other way around." I was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sound of wind chimes on the porch, the distant hum of traffic, the particular silence that settles between people when everything important has finally been said. "This place doesn't need your guilt, Jason," I said finally. His face crumpled. "I know. I just thought, it needs your growth. It needs you to become the man your father thought you could be, the man I raised you to be." He looked at me with something that might have been hope. "I can't give you a job here," I continued, "but I can give you something better. I can give you a chance to prove to yourself that you learned something from losing everything." From my pocket, I pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check, not a large one, but enough to cover a deposit on a small apartment, enough to buy some interview clothes, enough for a fresh start. "This isn't charity," I said as I handed it to him. "It's an investment in the possibility that you'll do better this time." Jason stared at the check, then at me. "Why?" "Because that's what mothers do. We keep hoping long after hoping makes sense." 6 months later. Haven House was home to 8 residents, each with their own story of displacement, dismissal, or simple loneliness. We weren't a nursing home or an assisted living facility. We were something new, a chosen family of people who had learned that blood doesn't guarantee belonging, but respect does. Mrs. Chen, 92 and sharp as a tack, had been living in her car when social services brought her to us. Her son had stolen her savings and abandoned her to the system. Now she taught us Tai Chi in the garden every morning, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had found her center again. David. We had two Davids now. So David with the beard had been a professor before his Alzheimer's diagnosis forced him into early retirement. His children, overwhelmed by his care needs, had placed him in a facility where he was treated like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be cherished. On his good days, he led discussions about literature in our library. On his difficult days, we simply sat with him while he tried to find his way back to himself. I had become the unofficial coordinator, but we all contributed according to our abilities. Helen managed our social calendar with the efficiency of a military commander. Roland did most of the cooking, humming old jazz standards while he worked. Miss Beatrice tutored local children in reading. Her teacher's instincts as sharp as ever. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. "You know what I love most about this place?" Marion said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "What's that?" "Nobody here is counting the days until we die. We're all counting the days we get to live." That night, I sat in my room, in my house, surrounded by my chosen family, and opened my leather notebook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "Things I never want to forget about Haven House." The list grew quickly, Helen's laugh echoing through the halls, Roland teaching David with the beard to make his famous pancakes, Mrs. Chen showing Tommy, who visited every other weekend, now how to fold origami cranes, the sound of multiple conversations flowing through the dinner table like music. At the bottom of the page, I wrote, "They called me a burden, but I learned that love isn't about carrying weight, it's about choosing who deserves the privilege of your presence." And the afternoon light was different here at Haven House, softer somehow, as if it too had learned the value of moving slowly. I sat on the front porch with my daily cup of tea Earl Grey with honey, served in the chipped china cup that had somehow become my favorite, and watched the world continue its ancient business of being beautiful. Helen was in the garden, arguing cheerfully with Roland about whether to plant marigolds or petunias in the border beds. Their voices carried across the yard, comfortable in their disagreement, secure in their friendship. Mrs. Chen was teaching origami to two neighbor children who had wandered over, drawn by the promise of cookies and the novelty of an adult who actually listened to their stories. A woman approached from the sidewalk, walking slowly, uncertainly. She was perhaps 70, well-dressed but with the particular weariness of someone carrying invisible burdens. She paused at our gate, reading the small bronze plaque, then looked up at the house with something that might have been longing. "Excuse me," she called softly. Are you the Haven House?" I set down my teacup and smiled. "We are. Can I help you?" She approached hesitantly, as if afraid she might be intruding. "I heard about this place from my friend Margaret. She said you take in people like us. People like us. People who've been told they're too much trouble, too expensive, too..." She trailed off, but I understood. "Would you like to sit?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me. She settled carefully, clutching her purse with hands that trembled slightly. "My daughter-in-law says I'm bringing down the mood of their house. My son doesn't disagree. They want me to find somewhere else to live, but everywhere I look, they treat old people like we're already dead." I nodded, recognizing the particular pain in her voice. "What's your name?" "Frances." "Frances Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen in your garden, I'm sure, though wouldn't that be something?" "Actually," I said with a smile, "she is Mrs. Chen. Small world." Frances looked toward the garden where Mrs. Chen was patiently showing the children how to make paper flowers. "She looks happy." "She is. We all are, most days." "How?" It was such a simple question with such a complicated answer. How do you explain to someone that happiness after 70 isn't about pretending age doesn't matter, but about insisting that it does that accumulated wisdom, hard-won perspective, and the simple dignity of having survived this long deserves celebration, not tolerance. We take care of each other, I said finally. Not because we have to, but because we want to. We remember that there's a difference between being needed and being endured. Francis was quiet for a moment, watching the late afternoon light play across the garden. My husband used to say I was the strongest person he knew. When did I become so weak? You didn't, I said firmly. You just ended up in a place that couldn't see your strength. From inside the house came the sound of piano music, Miss Beatrice playing an old hymn with the particular joy of someone who had rediscovered her finger's memory. The music drifted through the open windows and across the porch, wrapping around us like a blessing. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Grandma, it's Tommy. Dad gave me your number. Can I come visit this weekend? I want to see your house. I smiled, typing back quickly. Of course, sweetheart, we'd love to have you. Francis noticed my expression. Good news. The best kind, my grandson wants to visit. Does he know about what happened with your son? Some of it. Enough to understand that families are complicated, but love doesn't have to be. As if summoned by our conversation, Helen appeared on the porch steps, slightly out of breath but grinning. Ruth, you need to come see this. Roland taught David how to make bread, and they're both covered in flour and arguing about yeast like it's the most important thing in the world. I stood, my joints protesting, but my spirit light. Francis, would you like to come in, meet everyone? See what we've built here? She hesitated, then nodded. I think I would. As we walked toward the front door, I paused to look back at the porch where my teacup sat abandoned, the late sunlight turning the honey-colored liquid to gold. In a few hours, I would call Jason to tell him about Tommy's visit. Tomorrow, I would help Frances figure out whether Haven House might be right for her. Next week, I would sit with the city planning committee to discuss zoning for the second Haven House we were hoping to build across town. But right now, in this golden hour of a life I had almost convinced myself was over, I was exactly where I belonged. Not because someone allowed me to be here, but because I had chosen it. Not because I was tolerated, but because I was treasured. I had learned, finally, that the opposite of being a burden isn't being useful, it's being valued for who you are, not what you can do. It's waking up in a place where your presence is a gift, not a problem to be solved. The screen door closed softly behind us as we stepped into the warm light of home. Haven House stands today as a testament to the truth that endings can be beginnings, that discarded can become discovered, and that sometimes the most powerful thing an invisible woman can do is simply refuse to disappear. It houses 12 residents now, with a waiting list of people who have learned that there is life after being told your life is over. If you know someone who needs to remember their worth, who has been made to feel like a burden instead of a blessing, tell them about Haven House. Tell them that somewhere, other people are writing new chapters when the world insists their story is finished. Tell them they are not alone.